The major part missing right now is that we have to create an inside level, and this is what this part will be about. And fortunately, there isn't very much that we need to get started. Basically, we're going to reuse the tile map and the earlier bits we have built to build this level. There's only one thing that I absolutely have to cover, and that is how to use a tile set across multiple tile maps. So we don't have to redraw all of the shapes for the collision and the lights. But that is very easily done. Here we are back in Godot, and first of all, I want to close the item container, the toilet, and the crate. So I have only the levels open. And what I want to do right now is inside of the level, I want to add in the ground a tile map. So with Control or Command A, I want to add a tile map. The issue right now is that for this tile map, we could create a tile set, new tile set, and then redo all the stuff we have done for the house. As a matter of fact, let me reopen the house, or the house scene to be a bit more specific. There we have built all of the stuff with a tile map. And the tile map got quite extensive. So if I look at tile set, and all of this, under paint, we have painted a whole bunch of physics layers. They can see it a bit better. And on top of that, we have also drawn a whole bunch of occlusion shapes. All of this we right now only have available inside of the house scene, but we want to use all of that inside of the inside level. And for that, you want to go to Tile Set, and then click on Save the Tile Set. Now Godot is giving you a no file dialog, and there we have house.trace. This is the tile set we are currently working with. And this I want to save not inside of houses, but instead I want to save it inside of levels. Save it in there. And now if you look under scenes, there we have levels. And in there we now have house.trace. Doesn't look like very much, but what we can use it for is inside of the inside level. We can drag this house trace into the tile set. And now we have everything available that we need. Especially if I go to tile set, all of the occlusion and physics layers are still available. So we don't have to redraw everything. Also, the size of each tile is also correct. And that is pretty much all we needed. Which means now we can start with the exercise. And that is going to be, I want you guys to build the inside level. Make sure to use a tile map extensively and add some lights, maybe some particles, and just make the entire thing look nice. Pause the video now and try to create all of that. Back in Godot, before we start, there's one thing I forgot to mention. If you look at the layers, you can see that we don't have the layers from the earlier tile set. Inside of houses, we had, if I scroll down a bit, we had layers for the floor, the outer and the inner walls. These layers are not being carried over, so we have to recreate them. That being said, physics layers, or all the layers associated with the tile set, like physics layers and occlusion layers, those do carry over. So if I look at this house, there we have physics layers and we have the occlusion layers as well. Although we didn't change them, but they would be changed if we had changed them. Which means inside of the inside level, I want to create a couple of layers. And I'm going to use the same I have used for the house. Meaning we have a floor, then we have outer walls, and finally we have inner walls. I think I just called them floor, outer, and inner, but let me extend the inspector a bit and let's look at all of this. I called them properly. So outer walls and inner walls. So this should be called outer walls and inner walls. This is all we need. Now we have different layers. And if I now look at the tile map, we have floor, outer walls, and inner walls. Perfect. With that, we can start sketching out a basic shape for the level. And usually the best way to approach this is to use the rectangular shape. I already have that one selected, which means if I now select the basic floor tile, I can sketch out a couple of rough shapes. Let's do something like this. Then we can add a shape down here. And obviously, for all of this, you want to spend some time for an actual level. But in my case, I am not terribly concerned with this. I do, however, want to have some entrance area, and that's looking pretty good. And now I have a rough shape for the level. Once I have that, I can zoom in and then create the outer walls. For the outer walls, I want to use the pencil. and then do something like this. Also making sure that I finish the ending bits, like so. Basically what we have to do is draw a shape around all of this, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to speed up the video at this point because this is pretty boring to look at. Alright, there we go. This covers the outer wall, and you can still see we have these gaps in the middle. And for that, we have to work on the floor layer. We have these bits, we have those corner bits, and we have some round shapes for this area. And well, now we have to go through all of this again and add these other shapes. All right, that is quite a bit, and this is quite a large level. Finally, before I start the scene, I want to place the player at the starting point roughly here, next to the main entrance. And that wasn't the player, that was the camera, so I want to undo all of this. The issue we have for this one is that if I try to move the player, I always move the camera, so the node furthest down in the tree. But this is not what I want. I want to only target the parent, not the child node. And for that, Godot has another nice functionality. It's this symbol right next to the lock. If you select the player and activate it, now whenever we click on the player, we only select the parent node. We cannot select the children anymore, which in this case would be the camera 2D. So with that, I want to move the player roughly to the entrance area, and that is looking quite good. Now, before we continue and test all of this, there's one more thing that I want to do. And that is inside of the ground, I want to add is sprite 2D. This sprite 2D has to be behind the tile map. It's gonna get a graphic, so I go to graphics, and there we have ground, and I want to use dirt.png. So drag this into the texture, and right now you can't see this one at all because it's way too small. For that, I want to enable region, then click on edit region, and you can see what kind of texture we have. It's some basic ground texture. And on that, I want to select a giant area, so we are covering a larger bit. If I close this now, it's still not large enough, so let me manually update the width and the height. Right now it's 7,000, let's go with 10,000. Probably still too small, let's say 15,000. Definitely better. And for the height, we currently have about 4,000. Let's go with 10,000 and move the thing in the right spot. Something like this. That's feeling a bit better. Now the issue we have right now is that the repetition of these pixels is wrong, so we are stretching out the outer bits. For that, I want to go to texture, and repeat should be enabled. Now this is looking significantly better. And with that, let's test this particular scene. And I can move around. I still get collisions, and I am quite happy with this. At the moment, we are still able to walk out of the building and then break the game. Meaning, if I walk too long in one direction, you will be seeing the background. There we go. But in the actual level, once the game is done, I'm going to add another area here that is going to transition us to the outside level. So that way the player will never notice. But so far, this is looking pretty good. Although we don't have any inside bits. And for that, I want to work in the tile map again, and now we have inner walls. And for the inner walls, we have to use the bits at the bottom, and I am probably going to speed up all of this once again, because looking at this part is going to be incredibly boring. But basically all you want to do is to add a few parts, and then make the game look good. Alright, with that we have a couple of interior walls. Obviously, as always, this isn't too fancy, and for your game, if you want to have a good looking one, you want to spend a lot more time on all of that. But for my purposes, this is a decent tile map. Which means next up, we can add some lights. Now the lights I want to have in a separate node so that we have the ground, projectiles, the player, and then I want to have lights. Since we want to have this inside of the inside level and the outside level, I'm going to create a new node inside of the parent level. What I want in there is a node 2D that I will call lights. If I now save the scene, inside of the inside level, we have lights. The one light that we have already used, if I open, I think I called it light fan animation. That one, I can place this in a couple of spots. Let's say one here, then I can duplicate it, place another one, I don't know, let's say somewhere here, and then the final one somewhere over there. And let's test all of that. It's looking pretty good. So I am reasonably happy with that. There are a few more lights that we can work with. If I close ground and look at lights, there we have overlays, and then there we have whole, infrastructure, and lattice. Basically, what those are, if I direct them in there, we have simply a kind of light texture that we could use as an overlay. The way you would want to use it, I want to place all of this into the lights. You want to go to visibility, and under modulate, you want to lower the transparency quite a bit, something like this. And once you have that, you can use all of that to drag image to something like this. I guess I could move it over here, so we're covering the entire area. And a bit more, something like that. And now, if I run the game, we have an overlay that adds a bit more texture. It doesn't look ideal, but I think you get the idea. Let's say for this one, I want to lower the opacity quite a bit more, so it's barely visible. Something like this, and yeah, that gives it a bit more of an atmosphere. And essentially what you want to do is, once again, you want to scatter around a couple of these throughout the inside level, make the entire game look good. By the same logic, we could add a few more lights. For example, if I add another sprite 2D, we could add a hole, add it to the texture, and there we have a hole. And if you hold Alt and Shift, you can scale it up proportionally. And this, once again, I want to modulate and lower the modulation and lower the transparency, and then give it a slightly different color to add a bit of atmosphere. Something like this looks good. And finally, we have the lattice. So let me duplicate the sprite 2D and paste in the lattice. And this one is a bit too large, so let's scale it down. And I want to move it, I don't know, let's say somewhere here, and also change the modulation so it's a bit less visible. It's probably a bit too little. There we go. So with that, we can add a few more lights, and those I want to duplicate just to place them in different spots. I am probably going to speed up all of this quite a bit because, well, it's going to be boring to watch. This is fairly manual labor. All right, I think with that, we have a decent start, especially for a tutorial. The last thing I want to do is to duplicate this industrial line, then rotate it. And this you can do, by the way. On top, you have these symbols. There you have move mode, you have rotate mode, and you have scale mode. If you click on rotate, you're just rotating whatever object you're selecting. I want to rotate it to roughly 90 degrees. Now go back to the normal mode, and then scale all of this up. So we are covering the entire range. And then scale it a bit further. And there we go. This is adding a bit more. And the more of the stuff you add, the better your level is going to look. Let's try and test all of this. That is still looking pretty good. And yeah, I'm reasonably happy with all of that. Next up, we have to add a few more lights. And those I want to add in the ground because the player should be on top of them. Basically what I want to add is the wall light and the simple light. Let's start with the wall light. And I could see another problem that if I try to select this light, I am selecting this other light. And for that, I want to lock the lights for now, so they're not getting in the way. As a matter of fact, let's lock all of this. That way I should be able to simply drag a light and move it to wherever I'm going to need it. Like this. Then I can do it again, place it with a transform of 90 degrees. Actually, negative 90 degrees, somewhere here. Do the same thing down there. And I think at this point you get the idea, and this should be kind of boring. But if you want to create a level, you simply have to put in some manual work. So let me create a few more lights. I don't want to make this too boring. Say one more here, one more there. Then a final one up here. And let's go with one here. This will be the first kind of light. The other kind of light I want to add is going to be the simple light, I think I called it. There we go. It's a smaller light. And I want to place those here. I want to place them there. Another one for this position. Then I can rotate all of this in the right way and just add a few more things. Like this. So now we once again have kind of a disco theme. And once again, let's try all of this to make sure it's working. And I get some lights, I get shadows. So all of this seems to be working just fine. Another part that I do want to add now, and we had this earlier in the outside level, that so far we always used a point light. Let me open, for example, the wall light. There we have a point light and then a couple of light occluders. But besides point light, we also saw a directional light. But inside of the outside level, this wasn't necessary. In the inside level though, I do want to use it. And let me minimize all of this, because this light should be all the way at the top of everything else. I want to add another light, and the light I want to add is going to be a directional light 2D. If I add this by itself, everything is going to be really bright. That is because we are adding a color, but this is not what I want to do. I want to go to blend mode and then subtract. Now the color we have selected is going to be subtracted from the color in the level, meaning the brighter the color is, the more of a color we are subtracting. So you want to have this kind of dark, so we're not making our level too dark. Also, if you give this color a bluish tint, you make the entire level more red. The way you want to think about it is that whatever color you select inside of this color wheel is the color you remove from the level. So in my case, I want to have a bluish color with a very faint tint so that the entire level looks a bit more reddish. And make this a bit darker, I guess. And if you toggle the visibility, you can see the result. And I think this adds a lot more atmosphere. Let's try it again. And there we go. This, I think, adds quite a bit. And one more thing that we can do now. With the player node, I want to add another point light. And for that, we need a texture. We can use the circle once again, place it in there. If I change the strength, you can see what's happening. With that, we are lightening up the area around the player a bit. So let's try something like this. Use all of this again. And that is definitely too much. But you can see that now we have some light around the player, although it's way too strong. Let's keep it at 1. That should look better. And we probably have to work with the texture scale. Let's try to increase that to a 3. And there we get a slightly brighter area around the player, which I think helps a lot for visibility. But once again, just play around with the numbers and just choose what you think looks good. I think we should make the entire level quite a bit darker. That way the effect is much stronger. When I run this again, there we go. This is feeling quite a bit better. So now we can still see something around the player, but the level itself looks really dark, and we get some lights, and all of this is starting to come together really, really well. All right, and I think with that, we have made a huge amount of progress. And unfortunately, if you look at this in the editor now, because the directional light, everything is really dark. So I guess when you want to work with it, you want to disable it. Also, you want to lock the layer, that way you don't select it by accident. But with that, we have another level. The last thing we have to do to make all of this work is to add a final area 2D. And this can just be an area 2D. This one, once again, wants to have a collision shape 2D. And this collision shape is going to be a rectangle shape. And this one right now is going to be in the center of the game. Let's scale it out a bit so it's easier to see. This shape is going to be the door or the transition area that makes it impossible for the player to leave. So I want to scale this to the size of the door. Something like this should be reasonably okay. Next up, I want to connect this area 2D with a signal to the inside level, so we can use it to trigger a script. The issue, however, is that the script attached to this node is right now a level.gd, so the one from the parent node. If I hover over that, we have level.gd, which means we have to do kind of the same thing we have done for the outside level, where we have created another script with inheritance. This I can do quite easily. I want to detach the current script and then attach a new one called inside.gd. I'm going to create this, and if I look at the outside level, they can see we are extending the level parent. This I also want to do for the inside level. And this is all we have to do for now. If I now run the inside level again, we should still be able to shoot a laser and shoot a grenade. And we can. This is all working pretty well. What that means is I can select the area 2D. As a matter of fact, let's rename it to exit gate area. This I now want to connect via a signal. Whenever a body enters, then I want to run a script inside of the script for the level. For this one, I can actually copy what we have done inside of the outside level. So I want to copy all of that and paste it in there. And this is very hard to read. That's better. For now, we are basically just slowing down the player. Let's try that one actually, just to make sure it's working. If I now run there, the player stops moving pretty much immediately. Now this part has gotten quite long, so for the next part, we're going to work on the actual transition. First of all though, there's one more thing that I want to cover. The debugger is unhappy again, because we are using the parameter body inside of this function, and we're not actually using it. We're just having the parameter, which means we have to add an underscore, so Godot stops complaining. And now run this again, no more debugger issues, and this is much better. With the inside level build, we have an outside and an inside level. So for this part, we will look at the transition between the two.